And ever since they've opened their doors, we've been proud to be partners with TPF, and so pleased to be here tonight. My job is just to say welcome. So we're excited that you're here. We know there's several of you here in the room. There's several of you that will be joining us online or have been joining us online. So we're excited for this really exciting intergenerational conversation. I wanted to just real quickly just say thank you for being here. You could be somewhere else, but you came to hear from this great panel. But also, this is, we don't want to forget, this is not only, it's an opportunity for to talk about IFCO, Pastors for Peace, our organization which has been around since 1967 doing work around social justice issues from locally, domestically, internationally. And we're excited that a lot of our work has focused in latter years on Cuba. So much of what we have been doing has been an annual caravan to Cuba, where we're trying to get people to go and see and experience Cuba for themselves, and help work with us to change our government's twisted policy toward Cuba. But also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Elombe Scholarship Program, Cuba's expression of international solidarity, where they have opened up opportunities for young people from various countries, hundreds of countries that have traveled to Cuba to study, to become doctors, with the only understanding being that they'll come back and practice in the U.S. And we at IFCO have been blessed to be the entity to help facilitate that opportunity. We have more than 220 U.S. graduates to date, and it's a continuous program, a continuous partnership that we have with our Cuban family. And so we've been excited to be able to do that kind of work over these last 6 decades. But the reason we're here tonight is to have a robust conversation based on the seminal piece that our dear friend, my sister, my mentor, Dr. Rosemari Mealy, authored many years ago. Fidel and Malcolm X-Memories of a Meeting. And I think the conversation will be really focused on ways that we can look at the pertinence of that conversation, that meeting, as it pertains to what we're trying to do today. So there's a full circle opportunity here to talk about the history, but also this very important look at how we look at this work in terms of our future work. So welcome. We're glad you're here. Don't forget, this is a fundraising opportunity. We're so pleased. I want to just, before I turn it over to Rose, who am I turning it over to? That one over there. To Reverend Dolomar LeBron, who's our associate director at IFCO. That's right. She wears many hats, but we're proud to claim her as IFCO, as well as her work with the People's Church in Uptown, New York. But this is going to be a great conversation. We're excited that Dr. Mealy, the last thing I'll say about her is that one of the many hats that she wears is also serving as a member of the IFCO Board of Directors. So we like to claim her wherever we can. And I could say more, but without further ado, let me turn it back over to Dolomar LeBron. Thank you for being here. Welcome, and let's continue this exciting conversation.
Yes. I don't know about you, but I love spending my Friday nights listening to stories and hearing about all these lessons that we have a legacy that kind of has followed us. And really, the hope for tonight is to learn some stuff. I'm sure some of us know some of the people up here. Some of us may be hearing from them for the first time. The hope and the goal is that we learn from each other, and we're able to draw on pieces, right? And say to ourselves, what does this mean for us today? The question for us as we're listening, as we're reflecting on where we are today is, how do we learn? What are the lessons to learn? What are the things we need to grab onto? What are the things we need to let go of in order to continue to moving forward, and in order to continue to doing our part, right, into to believing and holding on to this dream for a better world? I think that is what the hope is. And I mean, what better place to be on a Friday night, in New York City than at the People's Forum, Getting ready to hear some amazing stories and conversation. And so we're just so grateful for you to be here, whether you're tuning in online, whether you're here in person. And as we already heard, this is a fundraiser. This is a way to continue to support and collaborate and partner. So please give graciously, and please try your best to stay connected. So I'm going to introduce very briefly some of our speakers that are with us today. I'm sure that these bios will not even scratch the surface as to who they are, and so I'm hoping that we can hear a little bit more about them as they talk. The first person we want to introduce is Dr. Rosemari Mealy, longtime activist scholar. Dr. Mealy is the author of Fidel and Malcolm X-Memories of a Meeting. She's also an author of Activism and Disciplinary Suspensions, Expulsions at Historically Black Colleges and Universities, a phenomenological study of the Black student sit-in movement. That is something y'all want to read, so make sure you Google that. And she is a longtime friend of Cuba. She has lived and worked in that country as an internationalist journalist for Radio Havana, Cuba. In 2011, Dr. Mealy was petitioned by the Cuban Institute for Friendship with the People, where she was awarded the Friendship Medal by the Council of State of the Republic of Cuba. She was a member of both the Philadelphia and New Haven chapters of the Black Panther Party. Professor Mealy is an assistant professor at the City College of New York. Let's give a nice warm welcome to Professor Mealy, and so grateful to have this legacy join us today. In addition, we have our brother Joe Kay. He's the author of the book, The Crime of Impunity, The Crime of Punishment, and the husband of late African-American author Sarah E. Wright, whose reflections of the meeting appear in this book. He is a veteran New York activist and was a part of thousands of onlookers who welcomed Fidel and the Cuban delegation to Harlem. Yes, we got history with us. And, we're so glad to welcome for the first time, both here at TPF and here on the stage at TPF, Esperanza Humphrey, who is a historian of Black Studies and a museum educator based out of New York. She received her BA in History from the University of New Haven and her MA in American Studies from Columbia University. Her research has incorporated interdisciplinary approaches to spotlight the Black feminine identity expressed through various forms of performance art. Her latest research endeavors focus on the history of fashion and activism for Black women. I need to see this Pinterest, because I'm sure you have a Pinterest somewhere.
Nice, we'll talk.
And then Esperanza has extensive experience working with teens, having planned, organized, and facilitated a myriad of events for high school students. She also served as a mentor to and supervisor of an award-winning year-long teen program at New York Historical Society. She is currently the education coordinator at Poster House, where she curated the upcoming exhibition, Black Power to Black People, Branding the Black Panther Party. What are the dates for that exhibition?
So the exhibition opens up March 2nd, and it's on until September. So there's plenty of time to see it in the warm months when it's nice out.
That's right. Thank you so much. So before I hand it over, again, I want to just remind folks, we do have books that we're selling over here. Sister Anna is taking care of the books that we're selling. Dr. Rosemari Mealy will be signing books at the end. And we also will be having an auction over in the back where Gail is. We have some items for auction, and in particular, we want to highlight that, and I'm sure Dr. Rosemari will talk about this more, but we have 2 Spanish editions, exclusive Spanish editions of her book that are not even allowed to be printed in the U.S. So please stay for the auction, be a part of this work that we're doing. And without further ado, I want to pass the mic over to Dr. Mealy.
Thank you so much, my dear friend, Dolomar, another one of those young people that we do things behind the scene, if you know what I mean. So thank you so much. And also for all of you who came out here tonight, and especially those of you who could not be here from around the country and around the world who are watching us and also putting your comments and issues in the chat. But first, let me just I want to be very transparent, and I want to put this out front so no one will ask me while we're talking. I was not at the meeting in 1960. I was still a much younger person then. But clearly, not having that history sparked me and really gave me a lot of enthusiasm for wanting to know more about the meeting. So I'm going to just, first I want to raise up one of our comrades, Angie Langdon, who is a staff person of IFCO, is not here tonight because her grandfather made his transition. His name was Ramdut Sukai. So if we could just take a minute of silence and remember Angie and share with her and send her our love and warmth as she's mourning and celebrating the life of her grandfather. Thank you. And thank you, People Spun, and all the folks who are helping us to put this on together. We couldn't do it without you. So let's start at May. We're going to start, you know, in education, there's a theory called backward design, for those of you who are educators, where you start a project not at the very beginning, at the end, and then you work to the beginning. It's a fascinating concept because young people love doing that, and history is like that also. And I've learned a lot from young people about the process of learning, and I guess that's why most of my work these days are with the other two generations that are coming after me. But let's start at May 22nd to 24th, 1990. This is the origins of this book, okay? How did that happen? Our comrade sister, Asada Shakur, and I used to, I met Asada in Cuba. I didn't know her while I was a member of the party, but I had an opportunity to meet her and to befriend her and to carry on our views and our ideas. And we used to talk about, especially during this period of the 90s, when an aspect of our history was being commercialized. X, you know, you could buy X t-shirts, you could buy X this, X ketchup, X hot sauce. I mean, they took, as they always do, as the capitalists always do, they take our heroes and our heroines and they put a dollar sign on them and they capitalize off of it. And this is also during the period where there's a real fight back in this country where black youth are raising up again the importance of Malcolm X, El Haj Malik Shabazz. And so we said, we need to really internationalize what is happening. And so we decided that we would write a proposal to our Cuban friends, and of course, immediately, they said yes. So Casa Americas, which is like, it's like this place here, you know, where everybody comes. It's a center of events and activities and a lot of motion and action. Casa de las Americas agreed to be the host of this seminar, and it was entitled Malcolm X Speaks in the 90s, right? And so my task was to come to the United States and try to get, quote, scholars and activists to sign off on coming to this conference. And Asata was working in Cuba with our Cuban comrades, putting things together there, which they had no problems. But the issue that I was having here was getting these scholars and academics to just take a few weeks and let's go there. This is something that you can be involved in. and I can't tell you how many no's I got. You know, I can't go. How much am I going to be? Am I going to get an honorarium? Are you paying the way? And you know, it was so absurd. But anyway, we did get a critical mass of scholars and activists to participate in the seminar. And the seminar was held, as I said, from May 22nd to 24th, 1990. And it was an incredible gathering of scholars from all over the world. Latin America, Kwame Ture came from Africa. And when you get the book, there's a list of everybody who was there, who actually signed off in the end. We dedicated the time. And you'll see some of the people who came, but Brother Bill Sells, another important scholar in our history, he was really important in helping us to really generating interest to go to something like this. But we did it happened, it was great. Scholars presented papers, and we were able to get an exhibit of photographs from some folk here, and we put together this incredible exhibit in Casa de las Americas, and it was just I can't begin to describe how wonderful it was. Now the challenge was, okay, so now we have all these people coming together, and you know how we tend to go to conferences, you know, and then, you know, we leave and we forget, you know, I was there, you know, and you never have anything concrete, you know, to represent your participation and your attendance, especially at any of these conferences, and international ones especially. So I won't share with you who gave me the orders, but it was kind of like an order. Okay, what you need to do, Rosemari, you need to go back to the United States, and you need to find people who participated in this, who were there in 1960, from September 19th, the 10 days in Harlem. You need to find some of those people, and you need to write a book about it, you know. And so there was an Australian publishing house who agreed that they would publish the book if we came together with a book. But meanwhile, we had a lot of materials because I'd had the opportunity to interview the journalist who came with Fidel, Senor Pinalva, also Fidel, talking to him about the visit, meeting others, Juan Almeida. These are all like names that you need to really know who these people are. Juan Almeida was a black general who came with Fidel on the delegation. So Cuba was covered in terms of having those interviews. So the issue was getting the interviews on this side. And I'll raise his voice. Brother Preston Wilcox from Harlem said, okay, I'm gonna connect you to folks who were there, even the photographer who did that incredible photo that Kaepernick had on his shirt, that one that we didn't get any credit for. And so then that one thing led to the next. The photographer who went up, the two photographers who went upstairs, Conrad Lynn, who was well-known as human rights attorney. I got a chance to interview him, and I got all these interviews. It's all in here, okay? So now the issue was, how much time do I have to do this book? So I had like maybe, I think it was less than 6 months. So we put together the interviews, and I was working at WBAI radio at the time. So in writing the book, I had to figure out an approach. So when you read the book, you'll find out that it's not just reading, you know, like you're reading something that has no connections to anything. But I used the interview style that I was actually taught as a Cuban journalist. And so you'll find that, and Esperanza was talking about that today, you'll find all these conversations that merge together between those who actually observed the conference, those who were here in 1960, who were in Harlem. It's all there. It's all woven together. And that's really how the book came into being. Because when I researched to find out other things about this meeting in 1960, the only coverage, I mean, there was two newspapers. It was the Amsterdam News And there was also a black newspaper called the New York Citizen Call. And fortunately, I met the owner of the New York Citizen Call, who gave me, he said, come to my house. All of my old newspapers are in the room back there. You can go back there. You can have anything you want. So I had people were just giving me access to all this information. And I needed photographs also. And so I went back to Cuba, and they said, oh, you can have anything you want. Just go to the office of Prensa Latina. And I went there and to their archives, and I just had so much stuff. I didn't know. I wanted this, I wanted that, I wanted this, and I wanted all those pictures that I saw, right? So many of those photographs that you see in the book are actually photographs that were taken by Cuban journalists, by Cuban photographers. So that's Brother Saeed, so happy you got here. Okay, that's our auctioneer. So anyway, everything is so original in here, you know, and it's just, okay, so the book went out of print for 20 years. I couldn't find a publisher. Nobody wanted to pick it up because it wasn't, quote unquote, an academic treatise, okay? But that was okay because we started seeing where students who did find it, they were using it for their manuscripts and for their theses, and you know, the underground is incredible. So the underground is incredible in many ways. So we have some members of the BPP here, so we know what I mean. But anyway, the book it's taken on a new life of its own since the advent of the new technology. I've done a lot of webinars and speaking, and on the 62nd anniversary of Fidel actually meeting Malcolm at the Hotel Theresa, we did a webinar and brought in some of the old timers who actually witnessed the meeting. And one of those individuals was Joe Kay, because I haven't been able to find anybody else. There was another brother, Brother Campbell, Jim Campbell, from South Carolina, who was also a witness to the meeting, and he just made his transition a couple of months ago. But almost all of the individuals who are in the book have made their transition, and so for us, that's that history that we needed, and I'm so glad that I was given the challenge, to try to reconstruct that. There's one other book out called 10 Days in Harlem. We had a lot of concern about that book, but that's another one. But that came out last 2 years ago, and the author uses a lot of my material, but he did call me for an interview. But a lot of that material is secondhand, and Joe did a cut through critique of that book. We'll talk about that at another time. But so I'm going to stop here, and because I got to keep you got to keep the interest peaked up. Well, what else are they going to say?
That's a good place. That's a good place to transition. Keep us wanting more.
Right.
And Brother Joe, I think it's time to hear. You were there. I mean, I think it's not every day that we get the opportunity to hear firsthand witness of this. So please.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation tonight, and please excuse me for reading the first part of my material, an introduction. It has to do with the actual what happened 2 months before that meeting, when a group of African American artists and writers were invited to Cuba. So I'll be reading that now. In the summer of 1960, Sarah E. Wright, the great poet and novelist, now deceased, was invited to celebrate, all expenses paid, along with other African American writers and artists, including members of the Harlem Writers Guild. The first, July 26, in a free Cuba. That took place a couple of months before Fidel's historic visit. But Sarah and I had just got married, and we were planning to go on a honeymoon when the invitation arrived. So given the circumstances, she asked the Cubans if I could tag along. And her request was graciously granted, I guess in a spirit of romantic internationalism. It was a time when the political atmosphere was becoming quite toxic as Cuba began demonstrating that her revolution was for real, reclaiming her plundered labor and natural resources, and thus stepping on the toes of important U.S. business interests. The gusanos were streaming out of Cuba and settling in comfortably in staunchly segregationist Florida. Oh, here's a riddle for you. Why is the soil of Florida the most fertile in the United States? It's because it has the greatest number of worms. So when the date of our departure arrived, our group went to Idlewild Airport, boarded the plane for Havana, sat there, and sat there, and sat there. Finally, we were told that the pilots had defected and come back the next day. Of course, you can imagine what a field day what passes for newspapers in this country had. So we returned the next day, and this time everything went smoothly. The flight was uneventful. And then as we stepped onto Cuban soil, it was immediately clear that we had entered a new world, greeted not by a sullen people, but a euphoric one, a people filled with enthusiasm for the life opening before them. Most of that extraordinary trip has receded from memory, but some impressions will never fade. The spontaneous patriotic chants that broke out incessantly, Patria o muerte, Cuba si Yankee no. But of course, there was never any animosity toward us. After spending a few days in Havana, our group took a night train to Oriente province, where the decisive battle for emancipation had originated. Far outnumbering us were young people from all over the world come to participate in an international youth congress. As the train passed from town to town, at every stop we were greeted by cheering crowds, even into the wee hours of the morning. Reaching our final stop, we headed up into the Sierra Maestre. Streaming toward the same destination were 500,000 Cubans out of a then population of 6 million, often by foot, using every means of conveyance, walking for days toward the top of that mountain that had given protection to Fidel's tiny guerrilla army, as did its landless peasants, at first constituting the shield and then the sword of the revolution. At the top of the mountain, a reviewing stand had been set up, at the center of which stood Fidel, our delegation filing in close to him. In front of us, about 100 yards away, were ranks of landless peasants on horseback. At a signal, one peasant after another, faces beaming with gratitude, rode up to the stand to receive from Fidel's hands a deed to land previously monopolized by U.S. sugar barons who had kept them in a permanent state of wretchedness. On that mountaintop, of course, there were no accommodations for the thousands of us who remained that night, even as most others headed back down. The terrain was being cleared to serve as a school city for peasant children, the first provision for their education in Cuban history. So the ground served as Sarah and my honeymoon bed, and the star-filled night was our canopy. I should mention that while we were in Santiago, there was a theatrical performance of an Afro-Cuban dance group, significant because it was the first time in Cuban history that the previously considered so-called primitive and inferior African culture was given the respect it deserved. Back in Havana, we marveled at the beauty of the new housing going up for those with few resources, the bright colors giving the buildings a cheerful aspect, and we compared those with the drab, prison-like structures typical of our own public housing. Finally, on our last evening in Havana, Sarah and I dined with the head of the Hotel Workers Union, a black man who 7 months before could not even register as a hotel guest, even had he the money, nor use the beaches, for there had been a Jim Crow system to cater to the tender sensibilities of U.S. tourists. Now, the black man was in charge of all of Havana's hotels. So I would just like to read from Sarah's essay, which, as was mentioned, you will find, it's in Rosemary's book. The raw, gray September day was typical of New York in the fall, but that particular Sunday, September 18, was lit with a unique warmth and excitement. For worldly leaders were streaming in from all corners of the globe to attend the 1960 UN General Assembly. Nasser, Nehru, Khrushchev, and prompting the greatest excitement in some and the greatest consternation in others, Fidel Castro, coming to give voice to the yearnings of the people of a small island, as well as the hopes of the great majority of the world's peoples. All police leave was canceled. Some 8,000 cops were mobilized. Fearful of the virus of freedom, all major white hotels had refused their accommodations to the Cuban entourage. There was no room at the inn, they said, just as the Philistines had advised Mary and Joseph some 2,000 years before. Only after considerable pressure from the UN and the US State Department did the Shelburne Hotel finally consent to admit the Cubans. With these arrangements made, Fidel and his party flew into Idlewild, now John F. Kennedy Airport. We who had followed the progress of the Cuban Revolution with growing enthusiasm, we who felt that a piece of ourselves had been liberated when Fidel and his army marched into Havana, were glued to the radio awaiting the announcement of Fidel's arrival. Thousands went to the airport and then rode back with their Cuban brothers and sisters in an unofficial people's caravan. Thousands converged on the Shelburne, rejoicing, chanting, "Viva Fidel, viva Cuba." We thought little of sleep. At home, in the neighborhoods, on the job, we spoke of nothing else. One night later, the Harlem Writers Guild workshop met at my home. The workshop functioned not only to perfect our craft, but to provide an opportunity to talk about the relationship of art to freedom, about the responsibility of the artist to make a better world. And we were particularly supportive of the leadership of Malcolm X. Out of that group emerged many works of great beauty and power, but that night it was particularly difficult to focus on the work at hand. John Oliver Killens, the great writer and guiding spirit of our Black Writers group, was chairing. We were all in various stages of completion of our works. I myself was in the throes of writing my novel, This Child's Gonna Live. Before our meeting had formally begun, the telephone rang. The caller's news was electrifying. Fidel and the Cuban delegates had left the Shelburne and were proceeding up to the Theresa Hotel in Harlem. Unprecedented. No foreign government leader had ever considered lodging in Harlem to be sufficiently dignified. It was the Harlem to which we affectionately referred as the black capital of the USA. Immediately, we scrambled for our coats and headed uptown to cheer Fidel and to make sure no harm befell him. We piled into taxis, jumped out in front of the Hotel Theresa into a mass of humanity buffeted by a driving rain. Looking up, we could see people crammed onto rooftops, leaning out of thousands of windows, and a steady chanting, "Cuba sí, Yankee no." But these were not Cubans. They were my people, the poor, the abused, the disinherited, the trampled leavings of this country, offering their protection and love to the leader of another poor, abused, and disinherited people. The streets were packed, but the crowd kept growing, bringing light and warmth to a dark September night, bringing light and warmth into the bleakness of their own lives. Hundreds of heavily armed police tried to do their intimidating thing. People did not even notice them. Shortly after midnight, a roar erupted. Fidel had arrived. We found out later that Malcolm X was the first to greet him. They met on the 9th floor in a suite given to the Cuban people by Love B. Woods, a prominent Harlem figure and owner of the hotel. Fidel told Malcolm X of the incredible inhospitality his party had experienced at the Shelburne, the insulting demand made upon them for a $100,000 deposit against damage to be expected from Cuban barbarians. He spoke of the uncivilized and violent conduct a security guard had accorded him, but above all, he spoke of Harlem. I always wanted to come to Harlem, said Fidel, but I was not sure what kind of welcome I would get. When I got the news that I would be welcome in Harlem, I was happy. The black people of the United States were not as brainwashed by the official anti-Cuban propaganda as whites, he continued, and Cuba was wiping out racial discrimination. Cubans, Africans, and the black people of the United States were all in the same boat. I feel as if I were in Cuba now. I feel very warm here. Malcolm X responded that it was indeed true that we in Harlem are not addicted to all the propaganda the U.S. put out, and then they embraced. Immediately thereafter, world leaders, including Nikita Khrushchev, made their pilgrimages to the Hotel Theresa to greet Fidel Castro. For a brief period, much to Washington's embarrassment, Harlem became a world capital. After a few hours of milling around the hotel, we finally went home, and several days later, upon Fidel's invitation, I, along with hundreds of others, came up to the Theresa to embrace him, to embrace Cuba, and to embrace revolution. We rode that wave of exhilaration for days. Eventually, of course, that wave subsided. But what remained for me, what has always remained as I see so many of our youth deprived of any chance of life, as I am confronted by the ugly swamp of poverty in our communities, the ever more insolent racism, the upsurge of murderous hate, the rampant and still growing unemployment and hopelessness, the death that increasingly comes too soon. What remains of Fidel's visit is a social vision immersed so deep in my heart, it can never be dislodged.
Thank you so much for sharing that. A social vision that can never be dislodged. Embrace this revolution, right? These are the things that lingered with me. This, even the romantic internationalism. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. And let's keep this conversation going. I'm going to invite Sister Esperanza to share some reflections on some of what we've already heard.
Before Esperanza, if I may.
Yes,
Joe mentioned how Love B. Woods, he was an important character. Not a character, he was the owner of the hotel. And Fidel gave Love B. Woods a bust of Jose Marti, which it would be so wonderful to know where that bust is today. You know, thank you, Esperanza, for that second.
Thank you, Dr. Mealy, for inviting me. I think it's important to frame how I even got here, because it's because Dr. Mealy actually called me and she was like, I'm having this talk about my book. I want to do an intergenerational approach, and I think you would be a really good voice. But wait, are you over 21? And I was like, yeah, I'm over. I promise I'm over 21. I'm 27. But I think that was so funny. So after she had invited me to do this talk, I received the book signed, so make sure you get your book signed. Shameless plug, right? So I started reading it, and I really started to think about my work with youth. So I've been working in the museum world. I usually call it the museum world, within cultural institutions since probably, I was a teen in the cultural institutions as well, so I guess we can date it all the way back to when I was a teenager, so 2012. And I've been lucky enough to work with teens. That's my favorite age group to work with. And since I work in a museum and I don't have to abide by the DOE, does anyone work in the DOE? Okay, good. So I don't have to abide by the DOE, which is okay.
Safe space.
Okay, right. I get to design like curriculums on how to teach global history. And I do consider this global history. This meeting happens in Harlem, but as we can see and as you'll all see when you get the book, this is a global event that's happening. And so how do teens take this information in? We've been heavily criticized as a country for not knowing a lot of things about geography and global history. But one of my favorite things about working in museums is the fact that we are able to use multiple mediums to teach this type of information. And although teens might not know of this particular event, they know the United States reception toward Cuba historically, even today. And so I want to start with like the way I would teach that and how teens receive that. I work at a museum called Poster House. It's on West 23rd Street. And one of the photographs in the book that really stand out to me is actually somebody holding a poster. The definition of poster, as we argue a lot at Poster House with the definition of posters, but I'm very liberal about it. So anything with words on a big piece of paper is a poster to me. And one of the posters that one of the people in the crowd is holding up says, "Fidel is welcome in Harlem anytime!" ! Cuba practices real democracy, no race discrimination. I love this picture. He's like holding it up. He's on somebody's shoulders and he's like screaming it. But the way I would teach something like that is to have my students think critically about the word democracy and why the youth today are actually more inclined to like reject capitalism, as we all should, reject capitalism, but vehemently like attach themselves to socialism and communism. So thinking about that poster, I would have them just dissect that. What does that even mean? What is this democracy? What is this crowd doing in this moment? What is this outward display of like rejecting the government? Because that's literally what's happening in this book. Fidel wanted to camp outside of the United Nations because he's being rejected by all of these hotels. Like, what does that mean? You have this very important person who's willing to be amongst the people to make a statement. And even Fidel's super surprised at the warm greeting that he's getting in Harlem. I also want to talk about the fact that I did work at the New York Historical Society, but when we teach global history there, we focus on how New York centers global history. How does New York become the center of these global events? And this is one way that we can really think about that type of history. One of my students, I remember one day we were at Governor's Island. We had a satellite exhibit there. I think the exhibition that time was called something about citizenship. It was something about, it was so long ago. But we were casually standing there and a visitor came in and they were very upset because we had photos of the Women's March and then we had photos of some racist woman who was part of the eugenics movement. But he was highly upset, and the students were like kind of listening to my interaction with this person. And one of my students comes up to me and he says, "You see, this is why I say that I'm a democratic socialist, because I can't deal with things like this. Like I can't deal with people like that." And I was like, tell me more. Like what is in what way are you a democratic socialist? And we kind of embark in this conversation. And this was a summer-long internship that this kid is part of. So you can see the type of work I'm doing in these museums. Like these are kids that are constantly inundated with so many mediums to look at specific subjects. So we strike up this conversation, and in that moment, I realized that there is a generation of kids that are coming up and are very, very serious about how they want to interact with certain political affiliations and how they want to interact with economic structures. Some kid came up to me and said, "You know, I'm a communist by economics, but I'm a socialist in terms of politics." And so like thinking about these nuances of how the youth are interacting with political systems and how they are rejecting it's not just I don't like capitalism and therefore I'm not going to do this. They have reasons for this, and as an educator, I'm helping them frame the way they look at it. You can't just critique it without having these other important memories and moments to frame the way you're critiquing major movements. So yeah, thank you.
That's incredible. That's an incredible way to really, go into this next kind of question around how are we connecting these legacies to like new generations, right? Like I'm hearing you talk and I'm like, that's like Sankofa work, right? That's reaching back, that's bringing it forward, that's taking it up into this new mode, this whatever this new context looks like, right? Because we know that we're still fighting the same evils, but it just looks a little different, right? And so I'm curious, the first question I kind of want to pose to the panel is like, how do we see ourselves making these connections between that legacy and how that relates to the context today? Or how do we dive deeper into this connection between this revolutionary project that is still underway, still only 90 miles away from the United States in 2023, when we see that these effects of capitalism, imperialism, racism have only continued to increase and become more apparent. So how do we see these kind of legacies connecting to the presence today? And maybe in other ways, how are we challenging the young people, the new generations, to hold on, to keep holding on to this even as we move forward into a new world?
Well, let's me start by going back again to the source from 1990. I was invited for the months of September through November, was the first, to inaugurate a program at the University of Havana, where I actually taught this book with young Cuban scholars. And I had never seen, I had to go back and read the book again because they raised the question was raised exactly what you're saying. How does this history comport with what's happening now? And I guess the best thing would be for you all to hear what one of those students shared. Unfortunately, as you know, because of the blockade, there's no Zoom, right? So we have to find these alternative ways to communicate with our Cuban brothers and sisters, which is one more reason why we need to demand the end to this inhumane, illegal blockade. They're trying to kill these people. So I got several 2-minute responses when I asked them to send me something, and I got one that we just pulled out one. So if we could play the tape, the 2 minutes from what the Cuban youth are saying is the relevance of this book, this historical piece to today. She's a sophomore, but just listen, it's amazing how she presents a response to the question. And then we can,
In the historical memory of our peoples, there are men who have lived to conquer all possible social justice and have represented in their struggle the demands of the oppressed. Here in Cuba, Fidel Castro liberated an emancipating process that embraced all possible justice and sovereignty from the political to the social claim. In the United States, Malcolm X was a victim of discrimination and segregation of a race that was exploited. At the same time that in Cuba the battle against racism and racial discrimination was being won by establishing laws, norms, social conscience, strong struggles were developing in North America for the right to life, to work, happiness, and social integration. Our peoples have had historical similarities in terms of struggle, and despite the political and governmental differences, there has never been a lack of solidarity and internationalism from the independence processes to the present. For me, the meeting of Fidel Castro with Malcolm X is the historical evidence that we must work together to solve the big problems, leaving aside the differences. In the current context, political relations between the two governments are even more damaged, and even so, it has not been possible to separate the interests of the peoples in progressing and establishing harmonious and peaceful relations. The United States government's economic blockade of Cuba increases the economic difficulties of the country and makes it impossible for a large part of the American people who dream of and identify with our culture, the Cuban culture. It continues to be an economic, political, and social challenge that the rapprochement between the peoples of Cuba and the United States can be stable, so that they can build a future together. I think it would be a glorious tribute to those who have fought so hard to see our flags intertwined, trying to conquer all possible justice.
She says what you were saying, that there's this interconnection, that we have to transcend these generations. But what I heard and what I saw in teaching those students, learning from them, was that there is a generational barrier and there's the history, but there's also the fact that we live in a global world. And also in 1960, it was called the Cold War, right? And what do we have in 2023? Yeah, I mean, there's some connection here. Students, young people are responding to that. I mean, we have an anti-intellectual society, and it's perfected right now, starting out in Florida, doing Black History Month. I mean, it's just so many interconnections between that history then and the history that we have now, but that the reality is that the bottom line is that unless we struggle together internationally, then we're doomed in a sense. Because a lot of times in my generation, we always used to talk about how, why don't we have to deal with things here? Why should we be concerned about what's going on over there? But the handwriting eventually collided, and we realized that what's going on over there is directly related to what's happening here in a real sense, politically.
And I think that whenever there's like intergenerational talks, somebody always has to mention social media, right? So I'm gonna be that person. I think that's exacerbated by social media too. We are able to see there's so many ways that we can critique this. Like, I shouldn't wake up in the morning and know what's happening halfway across the world, and also what's happening in my neighborhood, and also what's happening in greater New York, and also what's happening in California. Like, there's in a certain sense, it's like, well, what's there to live for? Because it's doom scrolling. But when we think about international, like solidarity, there's no solidarity without community, and there's no community without solidarity. So we get that through social media. Yes, I shouldn't probably be able to wake up and know what's happening halfway across the world, but that also connects me to the person that looks like me, who probably has a similar journey to me, that's dealing with something halfway across the world. If I show up to meet with my students one morning, sometimes I won't even know what's happening. They're gonna know what's happening, and now we're gonna have an open dialogue about what's going on. Like, how is this affecting us? And they should all have a response for that. It should affect us, because it's not enough to just say, okay, that's happening over there, but we got our own issues here. We do have to think about how those instances over there affect us over here, especially Black people, because when the world, I think it's like when the world sneezes, Black women catch the flu or something like that. There are so many things that reverberate, and it always is gonna affect Black people in an extreme sense. So we don't have the luxury of just ignoring what's happening across the world.
I think that's a really good point. Absolutely. So we can't talk about the present context without talking about the role of social media and the role of that in our context. So for better or for worse, right? Because it works both ways. Joe, did you want to share something?
First of all, Rosemari mentioned a book whose name I have deliberately forgotten, on the same subject of that 10 days. but it was written from a pro-Cold War perspective. And that's why Rosemari's book is so much more important, because they tried, they released that book with a great deal of fanfare from the media, which would serve to poison the atmosphere even more. But we have Rosemari's book, and that must be promoted. Secondly, as far as why is the book and Cuba so much even more important than it has ever been before, is because this society is unraveling. And if you look, for example, at the healthcare system here, it has got to the point where half of all bankruptcies in the United States are caused by medical expenses. Doctors are leaving their practice out of discouragement of what's been going on, how the insurance companies have basically taken over. And but in Cuba, medical care, which is recognized internationally for its quality, is free of charge to everyone. So, and on the education front, you have 2 million students who are carrying a debt of $2 trillion, some of which is going to follow them for decades to come. And of course, we have a tracking system here where working people and poor people do not have access to higher education, whereas in Cuba, all education is free right up through the university level, and they even provide a stipend. And finally, we have the housing situation in this country where now it's getting unaffordable even for middle-class people, where millions are facing eviction either because they have non-payment of rent or they can't make their mortgage payments. Whereas in Cuba, all housing is affordable. There is no luxury housing available only to the rich. So these are some of the issues that we can bring forward, especially today. And then, of course, we don't have to talk about we do have to talk about the racism which is growing, which is becoming more open and fascistic, where it's turning into racial violence, not only from the police, which has who's been unleashed on the black people.
Yeah.
But when I went to Cuba recently, the police didn't even have sidearms, but we didn't have any kind of weapons at all. So these are the kind of things that we need to promote now.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. One of the things that we're talking about, what are ways that we share the story, and I think you touched very briefly on kind of what, I don't know what you called it, but the different modalities that education in different aspects of museums, right? But like, what are practical things that I think, either organizations, activists, churches, people can actually adopt as, in my head, I think about them as pedagogies, right? Or methodologies, right? How are we using art, these kinds of cultural practice to also teach, right? For folks who may not necessarily, especially younger folks, who may not necessarily pick up a book, but will look at an Instagram post that is something, or may go to a museum, or may go to some kind of art exhibit. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that, and then I want to invite those who are here in person, if you have questions, to get questions prepared so we can open it up for us, a brief Q&A. But I'm really curious about, there's so many different ways that we can educate, and in this country we're taught that there's only one way. You go to school, they deposit in the information, you deposit the same information out. But we know that being internationalists, that there are other models of how to share this information. I would love to hear a little bit more, expand a little bit more on what are the different modalities that you think connect to younger generations and younger people?
I'll be really brief because I think that this sits well with kind of the research and why Dr. Mealy and I actually, how we met. When I was researching for the Black Panther Party at Poster House, we use visual language. Everyone understands visual language. We don't really need words. Even if you don't speak a certain language, we all kind of understand iconography and we understand like what the visual language is of a thing. And I even asked Dr. Mealy, like, what was the visual language of the Black Panther Party? Why was it so effective? Why could you just put up a poster in the street and everybody would identify it as this is a radical thing? Or maybe at the time, probably not, you know, like we think about things very differently today, but like, why was this seen as like a radical thing? Why was this seen as like a unifying symbol? So I think visual language is a really effective way to teach, and social media is all visual language. Nobody reads captions, so that's why when I posted for this event, I was very brief. I was like, this is what's happening, come. But I just want to point to something that's in the book because this stood out to me so much, and as you can see, I put a lot of sticky notes, so I wanted to make sure I mention this. And just to summarize, Fidel Castro says, I've said 100 times that I'm not a communist, but I consider myself a humanist. And I think that that's so important because, I mean, I'm probably still gonna associate Fidel Castro with communism. I will. But after reading this, I start to think way past that. And I think that that's the best way to teach. Look at these situations as these aren't just political systems. These aren't just economic systems. These are people's lives. Like, these are humans' lives. Do you care about this? Do you care about this because you are a humanist? We are all here to better just as physical people, as physical beings. And so your alignment, I don't know if it matters, but I don't know how much it matters, because if Fidel Castro's sitting there saying, I said it 100 times, I'm not a communist. To what extent can we think about that today and think like, let's center humanism, let's center our humanity in conversations, and center humanity when we're teaching the youth, like center humanity, like this is something that we can identify with just by virtue of existing.
That's beautiful. And that, I mean, I would be remiss to share a quote by Jose Marti, who is a well-known poet and philosopher throughout Latin America, where he says that homeland is humanity, right? Patria es humanidad. This is the internationalism, is like also speaking to this, that we have a responsibility to each other. We have a responsibility to know what's going on. And so I totally, I appreciate that. That for me, this understanding this history, understanding this legacy humanizes us too. Reminds us of a very human piece of this. I really like to take this time to open it up to questions from the audience. If we could get a mic, that would be great. And I want to reiterate, I know we all have a lot of stories to tell. We will have time to tell stories at the end of the program, the service. I feel like I'm in church. But so please keep your questions brief so everybody can share. And please, let's make sure they're questions.
Do you want to call anybody?
Let's start in the back and work our way forward.
Gracias, Gail. There are a lot of mention has been made about solidarity. And I just want to bring to the forefront a quote by a great African freedom fighter. His name was Amilcar Cabral. And Amilcar said that solidarity is not an act of charity. Solidarity is an act of defense of mutual interest. And the question of solidarity is for us, brown, black, indigenous, and oppressed people inside the belly of the monster, and that's a quote by Jose Marti, have more in common with the rest of the oppressed people of the world and with the working class around the world that we have here with the multimillionaires that don't pay taxes, while all of us pay a lot more taxes than they do. So let's remember that solidarity is not charity. When you're in solidarity with the worker in Cuba, you're defending our interests and our class.
Thank you for that. We can bring it right up here. Sorry.
Hi, Angel. I have a comment and a question. I was in the Lower East Side after school program, and I put a program together, and I said, come hear about the master rapper, Malcolm X. And none of the students knew who Malcolm X was. So last year in the Grammys, they had a Cuban group doing a whole song and dance, and they were like against the current regime. This is the 50th anniversary of hip hop. So what I would recommend is finding some rappers who could maybe speak about this meeting and bringing out to now. So maybe you guys know Bad Bunny. Maybe you could have him do something about this meeting between Fidel and Malcolm. Or other talented people in our community.
Yeah, let me call my cousin Bad Bummy, see if he'll come with me on a trip to the next caravan to Cuba. Question, there's a question back here.
Yes, Hotep Peace family. My name is Dashan Farad. I'm a reporter from the MX Network. And what I would like to ask to our dear sister here, how did Brother Malcolm's assassination affect Brother Fidel? Did he feel that he was next? Did he get a little concerned? I've always wanted to know that.
Well, you know, at the 1960 meeting, Fidel invited Malcolm, and that's in the book, to come to Cuba. But of course, he was assassinated before he could do. He didn't, obviously didn't get there. In our discussions with Fidel, Fidel always, he says, and when he talked about Malcolm, he talked about him in the context of remembering him in remembrances. I don't know, we never asked him that question, how were you affected by his assassination? In all of our interviews and all of our discussions, and when he met with us at the conference, I noticed, and in the films and even in some of the writings, he always frames Malcolm in the present. And I'm having chills when I say that, because we don't do that often, you know? And I don't know if sometimes as political people, we become so dogmatic in our responses to death, you know, and framing death, and not accepting death, but accepting death when our heroes are murdered and assassinated, talking about them in the present. And that's the only way I could answer your question, brother.
And you know, that kind of reminds me, yes, absolutely. That also reminds me of like Fidel's vision of always saying, you know, and even Jose Marti, this idea about ideas are greater than any army, right? And protecting ideas and you know, even connects me to like Fred Hampton when he says that you could kill the revolutionary brave, but you can't kill the revolution. It's this idea of keeping and speaking in the present. I mean, I didn't thought about it like that either, but I bet you it was intentional to constantly be saying like, no, this idea is never gonna die. This idea can't be killed by anything or any power. So I think that that's really powerful to think about that. Any other questions? We have someone right here, second row.
Thank you very much. So my name is Chris Duran. I just was able to be lucky enough to go on the 51st contingent of the Venceremos Brigade just a few weeks ago. So my question was in terms of, and I guess especially youth, but not just youth, in terms of practicing like concrete solidarity with the Cuban Revolution, in terms of your experiences of like how students, how youth can interact with the Cuban Revolution. One of the things that I, for the most part, thought about while in Cuba was interacting with former political prisoners of the Cuban Five, who do a lot of Cuban solidarity work with revolutionaries here, and how the political prison struggle that Cuba has always supported for anti-colonial movements here in the U.S. for people like Mumia and Sundiata, how that can connect people in terms of anti-imperialist framework for their organizing.
let me just see. That's the other thing about the meeting. The meeting established a continuum, and that continuum was this conference, the work of the Vincent Amos Brigade. I was on the Brigada Cinco. Also, the meetings that have been held with Code Pink, all of the work that the solidarity organizations in this country have done. When Fidel offered the 500 scholarships to U.S. students anybody who wanted to come and study at Elombe, to me, all those outreaches and all those gestures and the responses have been a continuum of this meeting. You know, and so every time that we go to Cuba with a delegation or struggle to get delegations here, this whole thing about ending the blockade, it's really a continuum of that 1960 meeting between Fidel and Malcolm. That's how powerful that meeting was, because young Cuban students know about the meeting. You know, there's a park in Havana where there's a bust on one side of Martin Luther King, and on the other side, it's a bust of Malcolm X. And along the, and Atno, he's here, he saw it. It was in need of repair, and a group of African-American folks from, I think they were communications people from here, they went there and they refurbished the park. That's a continuum, you know. I mean, people don't, I mean, there's no other park in the world like that, right? And then, of course, young people who study the language at the translation schools. When I was there, when I worked there, the brothers particularly would walk up to me with the same intonation of Malcolm, the translators. And I was wondering, how, you know, and because they learned the English, but they were also using his tapes, his speeches, you know? So it's those little antidotes that I think represent the solidarity, brother, and the fact that you were on the brigade and meeting with the Cuban Five. But another group that we should really try to meet with when we go are the heroes of Quito Carnival. You know, those heroes. And for those of you who do not know about that battle, that was a decisive, and that's the other thing, as old people, as elders, we should never assume that we're talking to people who know. We should never use language that maybe they don't know, you know, they don't know this, a lot of this theoretical language. You know, we have to listen to the young people and communicate on their language too. And I think your idea about Bad Bunny is wonderful. Yeah, we should try to work on that. But I'm getting back to the point of what you say, brother. It's so important to have Quito Carnival. That was a decisive battle that brought both the apartheid, head of the apartheid regime to his knees and forced the South African apartheid government to negotiate with the ANC. But had it not been for that battle where the Cubans sacrificed so much, sent their entire military brigades and everything. It was called Operation Carlotta. Again, bringing up the name of a Lukumi woman who fought against enslavement, and they named the battle after her, you know, Operation Carlotta. So all that I'm saying is this is the kind of history that we can connect, and we all, some of us have this history, but the Cubans have that history, and that's why the next time any of you go to Cuba, there's the Fidel Castro House Center. You've got to go there. Absolutely. It's new, it's amazing, you know, and it has the history that we're talking about. It's been immortalized there. And so the solidarity is important. We need to keep going. Cubans are having this is a terrible time now. I mean, it's hard. I was there during the hurricane. For 10 days, we had no water, no electricity, you know. But the people came together, you know. went to the dams and got water to flush the toilet, looking for bread, because this country, they can't get things, So we have to go there to support that, because it's the only thing left. It's the only free territories in the Americas. And we need to be going there, challenging this blockade, but at the same time, we got to put fire to the Biden administration, So on that, I'm a little long-winded, but I listen to the youth, and so when the youth raise the question, it's important to share. And sometimes you just need to tell us to shut up, and, quietly and respectfully.
No, none of that, not tonight.
Right.
Not on a Friday night. No.
A couple of points. One is solidarity work. We all think of it in these terms that have been put out tonight. But I did belong to an organization of young people, almost all young people of color. And they decided to do housing work in the Bronx among working class people. And what happened was that I suggested to them that they, in their work, mention Cuba, talk about Cuba and their housing and or education or whatever. And they told me no, they couldn't do that because the people were so anti-Cuban or anti-communist or whatever. So this is what all that shows is that we have to find, as Rosemari was saying, we have to find the way to get through, to use not to engage in kind of super revolutionary rhetoric, but just to have people compare their conditions, analyze their conditions, and ask, how is it that one of the poorest countries now, thanks to the blockade, is able to provide housing and so on, or education and so forth. And one last point, and I would have to differ a little bit from one of our speakers here, is that Fidel declared himself a Marxist-Leninist, and he did it, and he also mentioned that he had always been one. But when the time came, after the invasion and the so on and so forth, the U.S. Bay of Pigs and so on, when he felt that people were ready, he told them that he was a Marxist-Leninist. Now, we don't all have to be Marxist-Leninists to do Cuban solidarity work or support Cuba, but we are going to have to learn to fight anti-communist bias and prejudice. It doesn't mean you're a communist, but anti-communism has always served the enemy. It has never served the people's interests. And we can't slough over the fact that Cuba considers itself a socialist, government with a communist ideology. So this week, we have to start breaking this down and again saying, no, you don't have to be a communist, but look, they have the right to be, and this is what they have accomplished so far with their system.
Okay, may I clarify something? Esperanza was quoting from the book on page 62, Amiri Baraka's Cuba Libre, which is, it was just an incredible essay that he gave me permission to reprint before his transition. Baraka was interviewing Fidel on page 72. And so he asked another question, and that's where that response come from, okay? So it's not something that is interpreted, but it comes from, quote unquote, a perspective. And I agree with you, what you're saying, but this is 1960.
Right.
Okay, and he's being interviewed.
Right.
Okay.
So I think we have time for one more question. I think Jose had did you still have a
Jose.
question? Yeah, right
Oh
here in the
yes,
front.
Jose is the organizer of organizers.
Joe, I think it'd be great if we all were Marxist-Leninists, by the way, but you don't have to be. But I it's more a speculation question. I'm curious if the meeting took place today. Again, it's speculation. I wonder what your thoughts are, what they might be saying. In some ways, conditions are even worse today.
Well, we would organize through Instagram or Twitter
Yes.
or TikTok. That's the first step. So I guess getting everybody together would be the first step. And I do think, I was thinking about it when all the hotels were rejecting Fidel Castro, and he was kind of like on his last, like, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna camp out in front of the United Nations? And then his advisor says, I have a hotel. I was thinking about how I think that there's this need to want to be the person that aligns yourself with like the rebels. And so like these organizations that are, especially after 2020, we saw this, like the raised fist and like we stand with Black power, we stand with Black people, and then we have the absurd like KFC put out like their thing. I'm not even gonna describe it, but they put out their thing. And so I think there's this need to wanna do DEAI, so diversity, equity, access, inclusion, or accessibility and inclusion, that type of work. And I think they would use this moment to be like, you see, we're for the revolution, but it's baseless, and it wouldn't, I don't think it would hold as much value as this particular moment meant. In saying that, I'm saying that there are people, I think that, or organizations or accommodations that could be made where people do care about this stuff. But I think that to do it instantly and to do it like, and be the first one to do it, people would find that that's so much more fulfilling for like certain like businesses. Like they would be the first one to be like, Fidel, come here. We'll pay for everything. Bring your chickens too. We're gonna accommodate you. And so yeah, that's how I would see that. I think that's how that would go today.
Yeah. Any other comments?
It's kind of difficult to such an abstract question. It's a kind of difficult to even think. I mean, I can't get past ending the blockade if there was a relationship between the U.S. and Cuba. So 60 years. It's been 60 plus years since that meeting, and it's gotten harder and more difficult. So I mean, if it was a different world, the outcome would have been different. What do you think?
Wait for the mic.
I think they'd be strategizing about how internationally, how to build support. Malcolm, I think, would be talking about how to build support within the Black community, and what are the steps, what are the tactics and strategies, how to move forward in building that unity. And building that unity is, I don't know, maybe even, much stronger than it is today. So both forces really talking about, within Cuba, building support for the anti-racist movement here in particular, and here building support, particularly amongst communities of color, for the struggle for solidarity with Cuba.
It's an interesting question because I often ask myself, like, we don't have the Theresa Hotel anymore, right? Like, what would play that role? Who are those people, right? That would be the ones mobilizing, right? And I come back to, we are the ones we've been waiting for, right? And as we prepare ourselves to kind of transition from this portion of the program to the next portion of the program, whether you knew it or not before you came, you're all a part of this continuum. You're all now a part of the continuum of this meeting, of the vibrations that are still resounding after this encounter that happened so long ago, right? And I think that with that comes, this responsibility to being a part of this continuum, this responsibility to being a part of those who are doing this work in whatever lane that we have. It could be you're an artist, you could be a poet, you could be a pastor, you could be a teacher, but I think, you know, these principles, these ideas of solidarity, the meaning of this encounter, the continuum, right, that we've been talking about, that we keep hearing, of internationalism, of solidarity, of, you know, making more of these connections together. I think I hope that we can leave this place knowing that we're not alone, that we are part of this continuum, and that there is still work to do, and that there is still work that we can do, and that we will continue to struggle until all peoples are free in this world, and we create that better world that we're fighting for. Bloqueo no! Bloqueo no!
Bloqueo no! Bloqueo no!
Thank you so much. That's a great way to transition. Yo, a question. Hold on.
Can I give you a mic, please?
I just want to know if anybody can speak to how, if you can comment on how Black Cubans feel today. Do they feel that there is racial equality in the country? Or what can you tell me about that? Maybe do they feel that not actually enough progress has been made?
Yes, I could speak to that. At one period, I don't remember the exact date, I have it down, Fidel said that that discrimination you cannot have years of colonialism and the mentality that festers, you know. So I'll fast forward. Right now in Cuba, there's some very exciting things going on around this question of race in Cuba. We start out with the Aponte Commission, which is a commission of the state, where the issue of racial, where the issue of race is being openly discussed, contrary to what we hear here. Contrary to what we hear here, it is being openly discussed. There is a group of Black Cuban women. They're known as Afrofeministas, and the Afrofeministas, they're all over the country. I mean, in every part of the and they are respected by the government. Their work is endorsed by the government. And they're working in the primarily Afro-descendant communities, where we saw on the news back in, when was it, July of last year, where we saw supposedly the group of Black folk primarily, who were going to be important to bringing down the government at that point. You probably saw about it, read about it. We heard about it here. So all I'm going to say is this. There is an open discussion going on in the country around this issue of race. And a lot of folk who go there do not want, we still say, there's no racism in Cuba, you know. There's no institutionalized racism in Cuba, but certainly there are remnants, just like here, of racist behavior, racist attitudes. And the Cubans will tell you that. But what's beautiful about it is that there's a movement. Chris, are you leaving us? There's activity going on. There's activity going on and discussions going on. When I was there in November, I met with the women, the Afro-descendants, and they're inviting people to come for their seminar just before July 26th, and it's important for us to have dialogue to see exactly what's going on in the country around this question of race. And certainly the blockade and the economic situation in the country has certainly exposed a lot of the inequality that exists, you know? So it's important to talk to Cubans about it. Now the Cubans who, Cuba right now is being depopulated, because thousands of Cubans are coming to the United States as a result of the economic situation. And it's going to be very interesting to see what political role that it's a younger generation of Cubans. This is second, third generation of Cubans that are coming here. It's going to be interesting to see the kind of dialogue that we start having with that group. And some of them are right here in New York because they were forced here in this exodus that the governor of Texas sent all those folks here. And we should be engaging. We should be engaging. And they'll tell you that they're leaving because of the economic situation. And of course, many of them are Cubans of Afro descendants. I mean, so what have you heard about what's going on there?
Not that I have, but just African-American friend of mine who traveled there had a different experience. And she shared with me that she had spoken to Cubans and that they didn't think that enough progress had been made, that Fidel Castro didn't actually do enough for their people. I've been there, I've had wonderful experiences, but I was just curious to hear your thoughts on what she had shared with me.
Did she share any of what I said?
No, she did not.
Yes, let's do that. But we can talk more with her. Because we have something really exciting coming up next.
Yeah, we have something very exciting coming up next, but we would love to continue that conversation. And I want to introduce our brother, Baba Zaid, who is going to take us into our auction. And tonight, I mean, I don't know, Dr. Mealy, if you want to talk a little bit of what we're auctioning, share a little bit of what we're auctioning tonight. Again, we are fundraising for IFCO Pastors for Peace. We are getting ready to go on our 33rd French shipment caravan to Cuba in July. So if you're interested, please check out our table for more information. We also have some Zines, informational booklets around the blockade, around the terrorism list. And so we're going to invite you to definitely stop by. And we're going to hear a little bit more from Dr. Mealy about what we're auctioning today.
Nothing like an auction. Okay. Let me have the first book. Okay. To show you the importance of the meeting between Fidel and Malcolm X, in 2015, the primary Cuban publishing house, Letras Cubanos, published the book in Spanish. And this book cannot be sold here because of the blockade, right? So that's just how it hits us, you know, right in the heart. You know, are you from D.C.? Yeah. How you doing? I thought I knew who you were. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So we have 2 copies of this book. I brought 2. I can only give 2. Okay. So we're going to auction these off tonight, and you will be the first to get the Spanish language copy. Some of you may purchase one in Havana, I'm not sure. But these are, it has everything in it, it's just smaller. The photos are here. This is the official copy of Fidel and Malcolm X, okay? Translated by a Cuban author, translator, and endorsed by the state, published by State Publishing House. And it was presented at the 2019 Cuban Book Fair, which was really a great honor. So we were honored that it was published, 2019, yeah. Okay, and then the second item that we have is a donation from IFCO. I'll just, yeah. Oh, we got the Shea poster. We didn't want to open this, but we think that inside there's some really great surprises inside, right?
So that's more than a poster.
Right.
That's a weaponized poster.
Okay.
That got stuff inside.
Visual
yeah.
language. Hey, you
I'm
need
an old
that
soldier,
for the
so I got
poster
the
house.
weaponized stuff.
And then we have, oh yes, Brother Sam Anderson from his collection. He became such a great artist during COVID.
Sam, you did that? Oh.
Ain't no power
Like the power of the people, the power of the people don't stop. And nobody says it, of course, like Pam Africa, who's not here with us today, but she's definitely with us in spirit.
And what else you got there, Zaid?
Have a
Oh,
we
we
got
got
a Cuba calendar.
A calendar. Yes. This is beautiful. So I hope you bought your checkbooks or your credit card, right? There's somebody here who I was communicating with who is going on the caravan.
Who's your mic?
It's you. Oh, it's so nice to see you. Yes. Okay, sister, it's great to see you.
That's a memory.
We have a credit card machine here, right?
Dolomar, do we have a credit card? No.
Either Rosemari just for 2 seconds. Sign in the book.
Okay. I'm gonna come. Yeah, she's gonna come right now. Okay. Then we have Pastors for Peace, building alternative foreign policy. Who's afraid of the little yellow school bus? And this is really important history because it's the story of the 23-day hunger strike, where led by Revolutions Walker, Presidente, and they went on anyway. So this is really good history. Were you on that one?
What was that, 94?
Oh, you put it in?
Yeah, that was.
Thank you. Oh, see, people just come together.
Yeah.
That's what happened in Cuba, you know, when
Yeah,
people
people-
just come together and they share and, you know, yes. Right now, especially.
Yeah, this was a particularly great story because the caravan, this is one of the early days of the caravan. And the caravan, you know, we don't ask for permission to do humanitarian work. And then the caravan got stopped at the border this particular year, and they tried to confiscate the yellow school bus. There's a school bus? Y'all going to take a school bus? How white of you, U.S. government. We're going to make you look foolish. And under the leadership of the late and the most beloved Lucius Walker, his beloved daughter Gail picked up the torch incredibly. 23-day hunger strike. In fact, we had a major protest in Washington, D.C. for Mumia Abu-Jamal. They rolled up in the middle of the protest in wheelchairs, still honoring that fast. Oh, yeah, I remember, right? I remember, right? So somebody asked the question, how this stuff comes together? Young folks, how this stuff come together? This is how it comes together. We fight until we win, and we never give up, right? Now, what the hell is my assignment up here? They asked me to do some fundraising. I said, are you sure you want me to do it? I ain't got no money. No, the first item up is the book. This book, the Spanish version of Memories of a Meeting. What did we say we were going to start with? At $20? See, that's why socialists ain't got no money. We need somebody to start off doing better than $20. We got 2 copies. Who's going to start off? It's a fundraiser now. Yes, my queen, how much? $30. Is anybody going to do better than $30? So somebody got their hand up in the back. How much in the back there, my man? What did he say, 50? 35. You socialists. I love my socialist family. Right? Right? Does anybody want to do better than 35? 40. Socialists starting to smell themselves. I like that. Anybody going to do better than 40? 45. Young folks coming in now, right? 50. Queen said 50. Right? Anybody beyond 50? 50 going once. 50 going twice. Sold to Raina, $50. Rosemari's going to autograph that, right? Now, are we going to do the second one, or are we going to go to the other items? What's my sign? What's the? Okay. This is gorgeous. This is absolutely gorgeous, right? Ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people don't stop. I'm trying to do that in my Pan Africa voice. Right? Where we going to start with this, Gail? I want to see my young heads dig for this poster. What dog up there was standing? Where Esperanza at? They're going to start with 30? Esperanza, is this worth $30 or is this worth more than $30? How much more? 35? Oh, you punky. Sorry, 35. Somebody do better than 35. Somebody said 45. Uh-oh. Jose, 50. Is that Jose Alfaro? I didn't even recognize you, man. What's good? Jose Alfaro said 50. 55. Uh-oh, Jose. Uh-oh. 55. Anybody gonna best 55? 60. Oh, whoa. 60. Oh, in the back. 70. Oh, people power popping up now. That's right. 70. 75. About to say he's trying to give us some auctioneer diplomacy. 71. 75. Anybody better than 75? See, it's incremental socialism. I love this shit, right? 78. All right. Somebody at least get 80. Eh? Y'all can't let him walk with that. 80. All right. Anybody gonna best 80? 100. Oh, Randa coming in with some guns. I ain't mad at you, Queen. She smacked me upside the head with a Benjamin. Somebody want to best that Benjamin? Huh? Going once. Teacher woman, you gonna best this? Going twice? Going 3 times? Whoa, wait, who said 101? Oh, okay. She said 120. Huh? 130? 140. She said she could have it. Going once, going twice, going 3 times, and ain't no power like the power of the people. The power of the people. Don't stop. Give us some love. Where's that weaponized poster of Che? Oh, it is. No, that ain't it. Oh, I'm walking past it. Man. To all my young heads who watch TV, there's a jive show called The Godfather of Harlem that's on. And they had a scene last week. It was supposed to be a Che and Malcolm. That scene was bullshit. All right, just straight bullshit. Right. On behalf of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee, I'm telling y'all that was bullshit. All right. This is the real Che, and the 2 revolutionaries adored each other. And they just missed each other in 64 and 65. Che was supposed to come back to Harlem at the Audubon Ballroom, and some things came up. He couldn't come. Then, of course, Malcolm gets assassinated. And interestingly, in the aftermath of Malcolm's assassination, where does Che wind up? Che winds up in Africa, underground, working with the Lumumba forces, combating Mobutu, right? So, you know, that's the real Che, and that's the real Malcolm. What we want to start with here, Madam Gail. $30? We got a call to start at $30 for this 2-sided, weaponized, because something's inside here. I don't know what's inside. They ain't tell me what's inside, but something's inside here. I don't know if it's a book or some pages or some more pictures, but something inside here. Huh? A Valentine? I bet it's going to be one radical motherfucking Valentine if it's a Valentine. What we gonna start with? What we gonna start with? Let's start with 30, right? We're gonna start with 30. Somebody wanna better than 30? Somebody wanna go better than 30 for Che, a loaded poster package of Che. Yes, sir. I can't hear you. 40. Young man said 40. Young man said 40. Anybody want to do better than his 40? Anybody dare do better than 40 for this loaded poster give of Comandante Che? Anybody? Y'all done got quiet. It's a fundraiser, y'all. Shoot. Right? Huh? Yeah, students ain't got no money. I know, son. Right? Going once. Going twice. Going 3 times. You got it for $40, son. You got it. DVDs. Who's in the DVDs? I guess that's old heads in the DVDs, is that right? But I don't know that this is available other than in DVD. Gail, that's the only way this is available now, right? Yeah, but it's not on YouTube and whatnot, is what I'm getting at. Right? This is the only way to get it, right? Okay. So this is a golden moment of solidarity, of struggle between our movements here in the United States and our beloved comrades in Cuba. Yes, ma'am. Come on, Esperanza, come on.
Given her the incredibly important work that our sister Esperanza does with the youth, I think that this ought to be a part of the informational package that we present to our sister. Yes, absolutely. To further her education, but also so she can continue to impart education on our young people. So that's what I think ought to.
So somebody still contribute to it, though. I love that. But it's a fundraiser, see? Yeah, that's
all right.
She said, just like a daddy doing that stuff, too. He ain't had no money either.
No, he not. That's right. He died poor, too. That's
$40. $40. Donate it to our students. Somebody. $40. Come on now. $40 to our students. I gotta come out my own pay.
No, all right, Jose Alfaro.
Going once. Going twice.
For the students.
Jose Alfaro, gracias.
Woo! Thank you.
Right?
Yes.
I just want to say that we're developing teen programs at Poster House, and I'm headlining that. So I'm gonna make sure that this goes in our arsenal for teen programs, and maybe we can do like a screening there, or do some. Yeah, this is gonna be amazing. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for mentioning that. Thank you so much.
Yes. I'm sorry. Oh.
Go ahead, straight ahead. Hey, that Esperanza, we have another Esperanza. She's a master teacher, so you got to step up your game, kid. I'm telling you, right? Now, our last item, and Gail, where we want to start at? Sam, what do you think we should start at? Y'all so damn. All right. My favorite teacher said $20. We'll start with that. A 2023 95th anniversary of the life of Ernesto Che Guevara. June will be his 95th birthday. Right? Starting at $20. Now somebody reaching into their pocketbook. You got some money, you got some guns in there. What you got? She pulled out a lifesaver. $20. Calendar for Che, $20. He said, at least somebody buy the damn calendar for $20. Come on now. Yes, young, you got $20? Now I know you one of them damn students. You sure you got it? She probably got 10. Asking Chris to give her 5. $20 going once, going twice, going 3 times. I forgot your name, daughter. I remember. Tell me your name. Huh? Kalia. Kalia. There you go. Right? See Gail for your 20. So this has been a beautiful afternoon. There is one more copy. There is one more copy of memory. Esperanza, come, por favor. What language do your students speak? Do you have any Spanish-speaking students?
Sometimes, yeah.
Could you use something like this? Would you need the English?
I think the English probably.
Okay, all right. Okay, I just know I got my eye on you. There is one more copy of Memories of a Meeting in Espanol, autographed by Rosemari. Yes, ma'am.
Let me just make an announcement that, and it really takes the author, Rosemari Mealy, to speak on this, but the Spanish edition of this book is very special. There are limited copies. It's not easy to have these books published and then to be able to actually disseminate them here in the U.S. Again, a function of the blockade. So this is a very special Spanish language version of this very seminal work that Dr. Mealy has provided for us. So just want to put that into context.
Yes. Which means it's valuable. Please appreciate its value. Right? We're going to start at 20 for this. Anybody want to meet us at 20? Right? Take the money, Gail. Take the money. I ain't got nobody either, Sam. We all ain't got no goddamn money trying to be socialists. $20. Yes, y'all. You gonna match it at 20? Somebody gonna match her $20. Somebody gonna match her $20. 50? Oh, this young man said 50. You a college student. You got $50, boy, tell the truth. He graduated. Well, I asked her. $50. $50. Huh? Somebody said 60? Who said 60? You said 60? $60 over here. $60. Who gonna match that? Who coming better than that? Right? You got a shot. You got a shot. Hang in there. They're getting punky now. Somebody better than $60. 60 going once. 60 going 2 times. $60 going 3 times. Congratulations. Give Gail your money. Give Gail your money. Give yourselves a round of applause. Our special guest, Rosemari Mealy, is at the table signing in her books. Please buy them. And anybody here new to the People's Forum, this is a space to come back to. This is a definite movement space that movement forces of all stripes use and value. I was here, the last time I was here, just a few minutes ago, we were here to receive somebody we love who had been in prison for 49 years. 49 years. And I'm talking about none other than Sundiata Acoli. Right? We know how good Cuba has been to Asada. Cuba has been to Guillermo. Cuba had been to Nahanda. And from freedom fighters from all over the world, where everybody didn't make it to Cuba. Sundiata did hard time, But he never gave up, and we never gave up. And our first chance to bring him into a social space was right here. I want to also acknowledge the fact on that same front, Kamal Siddiqui, we just had a emergency medical campaign for Kamal Siddiqui. It was effective. Kamal now has his medicine, at least a month's supply of medicine. It's a shame we had to jack up the state of Georgia in order to do that. So these ties about solidarity in our political prisoners is very important. Chris, your question was very important. Let me get this back to you because I start running my mouth and I go nuts.
I just before Joe K, who's trying to slide out the room, leaves. Joe, it was great to have you here. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm just trying to embarrass him a little before. We appreciate you, Joe. Yeah. And we appreciate all the panelists. And I just want to announce, anybody who's still interested, anyone still interested in applying for the upcoming Friend Shipment Caravan to Cuba, it's happening in July. Where are we going? We're going to Santiago, all right? We're going to Oriente. So anybody who's interested, please head to the front table there and get information. Also, if you know of anybody interested in the Elam Scholarship Program, right? Studying medicine in Cuba under full scholarship, make sure that you grab a brochure at the front table. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the People's Forum. Yes. Once again, we can always rely on our friends at the People's Forum to support every progressive issue there is out there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting us. And adelante, we're going to keep fighting to end this blockade. Never give up. Paz y amor. Sí. Cuba sí. No. That's right. I heard. Patricia, let me just give them the microphone, please.